All right, folks, welcome to Ninoscorner.tv. I am with Adam Swart, and I got to give this guy I got to take my hat off to you, Adam. You're a brave guy to come on. You're making the rounds on conservative podcasts, and I got to take my hat off to you, man. Like that's very brave of you to do so, sir. So, I've always wanted different perspectives and points of view on my show, and I got one today. You are the founder of Crowds on Demand, the original paid protesting firm, and one of the country's leading experts on protest, political optics, and influence strategy. A lifelong liberal, Adam now considered himself not liberal enough for today's left, which he describes as a party of tantrums. Not I agree with you on that one. Not ideas. He's known for exposing how protests are coordinated, funded, and weaponized across political lines. Wow! Thank you so much for having the bravery to come on my program.
My pleasure, Nino. It's really a pleasure to be with you, and your story inspires a lot of people on regardless of politics.
Wow, that's
I'm happy to be on your show just for that reason alone.
thank you, man. I appreciate that, Adam. Thank you. Well, let's get into this, man, because let's try to set the record straight here and at least break bread. And I'm a lot of people think a lot of liberals are scared to come on my program because he might ambush me, he might do this, he might do that. I'm not doing that. I'm going to get your perspective, your point of view, give a little bit of my point of view, and we shake hands and walk away. We may have differences, right? But at the end of the day, we may both like spaghetti.
That's true.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, in the Nixon-Kennedy debate of 1960, and I want to get back to that period in certain senses, is Nixon, I think it was, who said, we both want the same thing for our country. We just have different ways to get us there. Most people want to be safe in their communities. Most people want to have health care if they're sick. Most people want families, good schools, good education, good prospects for their kids, and they want to do something to take care of the less fortunate. I feel like people agree with that on both sides. It's just how they do it and how we go about doing those things has been really controversial, and there are definitely a lot of forces on both sides that seek to divide us.
Correct. I totally agree with that. So let's get started here. I got a little bit of questions here. First of all, I see my podcast is a little different because I look at Trump as not the administration, but the operation.
Mhm.
And I've been watching this for a long time. I'm a brilliant strategist, tooting my own horn here, strategist in boxing, and I know what I'm looking at. And I've always said, listen, the first administration, the first go around where Trump was invited to run. This was an operation, nuclear and beyond. What we're watching here is a sting operation, and I'm 100% on this, and I've been following this to the T and Trump, and but I'm also looking at both sides of the chess game here. I'm also looking at the two wings of the same bird type of situation. So I'm watching everything here because I always know there's someone always behind the back controlling everything. So let's get started on this. So you founded Crowds on Demand. How did you find this? How long ago? You're the founder. How did this all get started for you?
So sure. So it was 13 years ago. I was in college in Los Angeles. So I'm 34 now. So I founded it as a college student.
You
And I
founded it.
worked
You're
with,
34 now. You founded it 13 years ago.
yeah, so I was
Wow.
21 years old. Yeah. I
Damn.
just got out of being carded. So basically, um I worked with a lot of campaigns, mostly on the Democratic side. And the guys who ran those campaigns were figures out of the 60s. So, especially at that time, they were people who had kind of emerged in this sort of hippie Vietnam War movement. And these are people who were used to being able to drive huge turnout to events, right? So they'd be like, Adam, I was like the student coordinator for Southern California for a lot of these campaigns. And they would be like, Adam, get us 10,000 students, get us 20,000 students. And I was like, guys, this is actually pretty challenging compared to your time because students have a lot of competing ways of entertainment. It's not like 1968. So obviously we didn't normally get that quite to that level of crowds, but even when we turned out a couple hundred people here, 1,000 people there, it made a huge difference because the same speech made to two people isn't the same made to as the same a really good speech made to two people still just doesn't resonate, you know?
Okay, so I kind of understand this, right? Like when I went to
Yeah.
high school here on the border, I live on the border in El Paso, Ciudad Juarez, right? So we used to throw parties in Juarez, right? So we'd go down there and talk to the club owners and they'd be like, hey, and this is before internet. So obviously we just throw flyers all over the parking lot and get everyone there. I get like a buck a head. I'd walk out on a weekend and get like 2 to 3 grand, right? And I'd be like, this is the
Yep.
way to go. So how do you get the people? Like, do you have to pay them? Is it like, hey man,
Correct.
free drinks on us? I mean, how do you do this?
So yeah, it's a really good question. So yeah, to just kind of finish that story, it's like basically what we found is that when we were able to more effective even than rallies were protests, right? Because let's just say, let me just give you an example, and then I'll get back to your question, which is that let's just say one candidate is hosting a rally and has 5,000 people there. And I just turn out, say, 20, 30, 40 protesters against them, right? You know, peaceful protesters, right? Well, the media is going to come and they're going to say candidate X hosted a rally and these protesters protested the person. So I'm getting
Wow.
equal coverage with a small
Brilliant.
percentage of the number of people,
Brilliant.
right? Yeah, so that's kind of the idea. So back to what you're saying. So obviously in this case it was challenging, but I noticed that we were delivering, you know, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars in earned media. So earned media for your listeners is basically the what you would pay to advertise to get that same exposure, right?
Well, and all
As
you have to have just a sliver, a fraction of the people.
Correct. And I've noticed that, and that's really still true today. So the answer is we do compensate people. Now we vet people very carefully at all of our events. So everyone who's being paid, they have to agree with the subject. So we actually have multiple people in our organization whose job it is before every event. Let's just say we have a protest with 50 people. They're going to call all the 50 people and say, this is what we're talking about. Do you agree with this subject, right? And
But
they'll
you're
ask,
but you're paying them too.
correct.
So they're like, I agree with the money.
Well, I guess I kind of disagree with that though, Nino, because you know you're conservative. If somebody said, Nino, we'll pay you $500 to go to a BLM rally, would you go? I don't think you
Depends
would.
how fucking broke I am. No, just kidding.
Well, I don't think people would. I honestly don't
No,
think people would because
no.
I feel like, and so what we found is that generally we actually attract people who are passionate about the issue. But what we do, Nino, is we give people the ability who otherwise, especially actually more on the conservative side in some cases, the ability to express their voices because conservatives are actually more likely to have family obligations, child obligations, work obligations that prevent them from expressing their voice. So you see all these left-wing protesters, let's just say at a city council or local meeting, but conservatives who might oppose what those leftists are supporting, actually they're not out there
Because they have
unless
jobs.
they have jobs. So if we unless they have families to support, they have
So do
childcare.
you give like scripts and like pickets and protest signs to these people and like, okay, this is what you're doing, this is how long you're doing it for, and then we cut it here, or like, and you
Yeah.
and go ahead, answer that one.
So basically, yes. Now scripts is a complicated issue. I prefer not to use scripts because I like everybody to speak with their own voice. So I like for each person to articulate, hey, this is why I'm in favor of the issue, right? So if the issue is, let's just say, police funding, we want to have safe streets, right? Well, I want you to tell me why it matters to you that we have safe streets. If it's about blocking a, you know, environmental disastrous power plant, I want you to tell me why you don't want this power plant. I don't want to tell you why you don't want the power plant. Right? Now we can help people distill the points and kind of prep people, but I want it to be their thoughts.
How much is the going rate? Like, how much do these people get paid? Like minimum wage? Do you pay them
More.
by the event?
Well, it's definitely more than minimum wage. The specific compensation is going to depend. So, for example, sometimes what we're providing, because not all of what we do is political. Some of what we do is just have an audience. So let's just say you have a big product launch and you want a couple hundred people in the audience, and we just need people to sit and cheer. The compensation there is going to be lower than if we want you to stand on a icy road in Boston in February, right?
Dude, this is no different than social media. I mean, like social media, a lot of people have to pay for likes or pay for
Correct.
people to watch their video, right? I mean, I know people that do that, and it's just to me, it's kind of pathetic. But I mean, I guess if you want to boost your brand, some people do it, right? It's kind of
Well,
like
I
the
don't
same
even
thing.
think it is. So I guess I sort of disagree with you
I'm talking
on
about the
that.
social media way.
Yeah, the social media that I don't. I mean, yeah, I guess that's true. I guess the counter argument to that in either situation would be what you're doing is it's a catalyst, right? So I can't speak to the social media side, but in regards to the protest, it's a catalyst. Well, what we do is we put the bird in the air, right? If the bird being the movement, the bird still has to have wings to fly, right? Because what we do is we get the attention. There are a lot of amazing causes that never actually get visibility because they just don't have the money to get attention behind them. You see what I'm saying?
Right,
So
right.
it's a catalyst. So let me actually work you through a good example of where that happened, which is the Tea Party. The Tea Party, what the inception of the Tea Party, my understanding is funded by the Koch brothers, these very wealthy Republican donors. And a lot of the early Tea Party protests had like, I don't know, 20, 40, 50 people dressed in kind of like Revolutionary War garb, but Fox News, conservative media amplified that and the movement grew, right? So if yes, the money that the Kochs and other right-wing wealthy people threw into it, it what served as the catalyst, but ultimately a lot of people were upset with president at that time. This was 2009, 2010, and that movement grew. But if those people had
So
never
you're saying the Koch family funded these rallies first?
Yeah, well, it's come out that they funded the Tea Party. I can't say specifically what they did or did not fund, but the Koch brothers have been identified. There's articles by Time Magazine and The Guardian that have kind of said link the Kochs to the Tea Party. I mean, the Tea Party is a broad movement, right? But yeah,
You're basically talking about MAGA.
well, the Tea Party is essentially the predecessor to MAGA.
Okay. So do you only supply for Democrats and liberal protests or
Absolutely not.
okay, so
We work with
you'll
many
also do
conservatives.
conservative too. So
Oh
I was
yeah.
running a Republican, if I was going to run for office as a Republican and I called you and I said, "Hey Adam, I need some people over here." Am I allowed to do that?
Well, first of all, yes, you are. But one misconception is that we work more for candidates. We actually work mostly on issues, right? So we'll work on conservative issues. So let's just say, for example, there's some absurd tax increase being contemplated, a minimum wage increase, or some sort of burdensome regulations that would hurt small businesses, right? Those are things that conservatives care about. We've worked on all of those types of issues, right? So we will gladly work with conservatives, and we do for the reason that I've outlined is conservatives in many cases have a huge need for our services because the left is better at turning people out than the right because a lot of people on the left, if you're a hippie with a trust fund, you can go to as many rallies as you want. Whereas if you're working two jobs as a working class person or a conservative kind of middle class person with a family, it's a lot more challenging. So I like to say we're often the voice of the silent majority in that case. We
Okay.
we give voice to the silent majority.
So do you put ads like on Craigslist? Like how do you get people to come on board to do like a crowds on demand? Like do you put ads out and say, "Hey, I mean, because I've heard of things like crisis actors and things like that. Is that all part of this?
Well, so we don't affiliate ourselves with anything like crisis actors, right? So crisis actors being people who kind of pretend to be engaged in some sort of tragedy, or I mean that would be illegal, right? So
Okay, okay.
we don't engage in. So it's very important to clarify for your audience and anyone else that we don't engage in illegal activity. Our sole domain is legal First Amendment right sanctioned protests, right? So that means we're peaceful. We're law abiding. We do not block roads. We don't engage in any form of vandalism, right? So I'm passionate about the First Amendment, right? And we're lucky enough to live in this great country where the First Amendment actually gives us all the right to speak out peacefully. So there is absolutely no excuse for anyone to engage in violence.
Do you do background checks on these people? I mean, do you have to do a criminal background check?
Well, it depends on the particular cause and the particular demands of the client. What we do is our primary way of vetting people is based on think of it as a reverse jury questionnaire. If you're on a jury, we want to make sure that you're not biased, right? I actually want to make sure you are biased in favor of the issue, right? So what we do is kind of a reverse jury questionnaire. We have people who will kind of call and ask questions and make sure that people are on board. In regards to how we find the people, there are a couple ways, right? Number one is we've been in business 13 years. So I probably get, Crowds on Demand gets, say, 200, 300 emails per day with people interested in participating in our events. And they say, oh, I'm a conservative and I live in Mississippi. I'm a, environmentalist and I live in Portland, right? Whatever the case may be. But a lot of times we will kind of proactively reach out to people, right? So in the example that I gave you about the environmentalist group, we would reach out to local environmentalists and say, hey, do you want to participate in this protest and we'll compensate you, right? These environmentalists might not otherwise have gone out to this particular event, but we facilitate their participation.
So do you provide to because when I went to a Trump rally, man, I was just amazed, and I went there for the shock of it, and obviously I'm a Trump supporter, but I remember looking around going, this is absolutely insane how many people are here. I would have guessed 40, 50,000. I mean, insane. Sure. And then there was a little group to the side that was protesting. You would have been funding them, right?
Well, and I mean,
you would have been
commenting on specific events. We would gladly do a First Amendment sanctioned peaceful protest to raise awareness about an issue. So now, of course, we don't get into commenting on the specific customers that we take.
Because that was my next question. I was going to ask you,
sure.
do you have to provide crowds for Kamala or AOC or Bernie?
Well,
because I would imagine they need them.
Sure. And I'll put it this way. So one of the things is that part of why we don't comment on our engagements is because and this is true this has been true very much so in the Biden administration with our conservative customers as well, is because I'm a big opponent of cancel culture. I assume you are too, right? I believe, and I'm an opponent whether it comes from the left or from the right. So the left I would have so many conservative clients in the Biden administration, very wealthy people tell me, I want to fund this campaign or we want to fund that campaign. But if it's ever linked to me, I'm going to get booted from a board of directors. I'm going to get, socially ostracized, et cetera, because essentially of the cancel culture mobs. And now you're starting to see it on the left where you have this kind of where I think there is right-wing cancel culture. Maybe you disagree, but I think maybe you agree with
well, I'm watching both sides here. Like I said, when the pendulum goes really far left, it's probably going to go really far right. So I'm watching how we do this here. So,
and I actually have an analogy for you that you might appreciate as an athlete. The way that I look at it as a liberal is, you ever seen those football players do those sled drills where they're pushing the sled, right? Yeah. And there's a big, yeah, right, exactly. I bet you did. And there's a big guy standing on the sled, right?
Holding on to the pads while they get pushed back.
Exactly. So the liberals are trying to push the sled, move society forward. Traditional conservatives are the ones standing on the sled, slowing it down and saying, wait, let's think carefully. And that's not a bad thing. That's actually an important role. It's saying, let's think carefully about what we're doing, right? So what happened, though, over the past several years is there was no one standing on the sled. So liberalism, leftism has run amok, right? With the gender transitions.
Right. I believe it was intercepted and infiltrated and taken over by the globalist agenda, in my opinion. And that's
right.
This is all. Radicalized the Democratic Party, and it has been eating itself from the inside, thus causing.
Where were conservatives? I guess my take is slightly different, which is the conservatives were too intimidated. So during the BLM,
I think they were just asleep. They were just asleep at the wheel,
and that's where you get sort of a more reactionary hard right movement like the Trumpism MAGA, which is basically we're going to take the sled and we're going to run you over with it. We're
Well,
going to
what
take it.
Trump did was expose and ignite. What he did, he came on the scene and goes, "Hey, look at this," and everyone watching goes, "Yeah, you're right. You know, this is crazy." So all he did to me was he was the key figure in exposing an agenda.
Right.
And really, I feel like the liberals have no one else to blame but themselves. But it was through subversion taken over by a globalist, Marxist, communist agenda by subversion, and they used liberalism to do it. And that's what they're doing now. I mean, it's just, and unfortunately, we're in this, and what's happening now, we're watching this massive paradigm shift, right? We're watching this falling of the old guard and this new. I think, to be honest with you, I don't see. I see once, and I'm just going to give my little piece here. That's it. And but once this starts to go at a faster pace and the dominoes start to fall, I think you're going to see Russiagate blast wide open, 2020 blast wide open with Biden. That's all going to get walked back, and then there's going to be executive orders signed that will go to paper ballots. I think the Democrat Party could be done. I don't know if you agree with me. I'm sure you don't. I'm just saying,
I
like,
don't necessarily agree with a number of those things, but I do think one area where I do agree with you is that there should be the voter IDs, right? And most, I think it's like 75% of Americans want you to show up with an ID to vote. You need an
right.
ID.
So you don't believe illegal immigrants should be voting.
Absolutely not.
Okay, boom.
Number one, I don't think illegal immigrants should be voting. And number two, any illegal immigrant who has committed a crime other than the act of coming here illegally, even if it's a DUI, must be deported immediately.
So what if these I'm hedging my bets that these La Raza protests are going to start. What if they contact you and say, "Hey, we need a crowd to start these protests for illegal immigrants to stay in America," which they're just going to be a perfect target for La Migra. But I'm just saying, like, what would they contact you and say, "Hey, we need a crowd here for La Raza. We need
Sure.
protests for La Raza."
And I'll put it this way. Though where I would agree with the more left-wing groups is on the need for due process. Like I was on a podcast the other day, and the host asked me, "Do you support due process for illegal immigrants?" And I said, "Yes. That's the only way we know they're illegal immigrants, right? I mean, you're Hispanic, right? If you were pulled over, right, you don't want to just have them throw you in a prison in Louisiana and then put you on a plane in El Salvador. You're like, no, my name is Nino Rodriguez. I host a podcast, right?
Well,
And it's like,
I think also though you got to think about like the tattoos are a dead giveaway. The MS-13 gang members and stuff like that. And I
sure.
know a lot of them here. I've been on
And
both
that's
sides.
due process. So
Well, hold on, but I mean, if you look at him and you go, "Okay, this guy's not," but me, I have proper documentation. I show my ID,
sure.
I show my license.
No, totally. I understand that.
They
But I'm
can
saying
track me
that,
to my address. But if you can't track these people, I would say,
well,
adios, amigo.
but number one, I think it's due process. So yes, I think if you have MS-13 tattoos, that is one piece of evidence. Don't get me wrong. I 100% agree with that. What I'm saying is that that has to be examined in some sort of proceeding with a judge, and there has to be some. Now, I agree that the system has been totally manipulated by asylum seekers, but there has to be some sort of proceeding with a judge where the government says, well, here's the evidence that we have that they're illegal. Here's the evidence that we have that they're in a gang or whatever, right? And then the defendant, right, the migrant, or potentially the non-migrant can say, here's my evidence that I am here legally, right? And the problem is that
But that could be handled right then and there when they pull him over and he has his ID on him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but don't you think that should be done before a judge, I guess? Like, my opinion is that
I think it's a simple
uncomfortable with the
procedure. I think
authority.
you can figure out if someone's from here or not, especially, I live in El Paso, okay? So I
Yeah.
know what's coming here and what's not. And I know,
Right. I mean, you're a smart guy, of course.
yeah,
Like,
I'm just telling you that I think it's pretty easy to figure out, and
right. I think but I think that what changes us from kind of a more third world country is that you might have a hunch, and I totally agree. You're a smart guy. You're probably right 8 out of 10 times, 9 out of 10 times. I mean, Ben Franklin had a saying that it is better for 100 men to go free than guilty men to go free than one innocent man to be in jail. Right. So the premise of the American justice system, so I completely agree. And what you've identified is definitely strikes me as probable cause to pull someone over and examine. And then,
well, I'm not about checkpoints. I'm not going to be, as an American
yeah,
citizen, I don't want my rights infringed on. So I don't
me
want to be
either.
sitting
That's what I'm
in a
concerned
line
about.
of a checkpoint where they're checking people's documentation. This isn't Germany. You know what I
Correct.
mean? So yeah, I agree with you on that. So that is where we agree. But let's go back to the protest just for a second because I don't want
Yeah,
to
my
get
pleasure.
sidetracked. So what happens if in these protests in which you supply the crowds? What happens if they turn violent? Like who's liable for that? Do you have an insurance policy? Is there security? Like
Sure.
I don't
So
understand how that works.
number one, Nino, is we try to avoid putting our people in things that we think are going to escalate in that way. Now, of course, as I said, our people are only there for peaceful purposes, but I would generally avoid sending people into a situation that kind of has the potential of having, okay, you have some peaceful people, but you have some violent people. Now, as a First Amendment advocate, my belief is everyone should be judged only on their own actions. So if you go to a protest, whether it's January 6th or BLM, and there's violence that occurs, unless it was you who did the violence, you are not responsible for the violence. You are responsible for what you do. But with all of that said, it's important for me, because I want to create a good environment for anyone who participates in our events, to basically make sure that we're not kind of putting people in like a situation that would be extremely tense.
Well,
So sometimes I'll reject. Well, sometimes I'll do one of two things. I will either reject a client, or what I will do is put a stipulation, because you mentioned security. I will mention, hey, we can do this, but we need to hire 10, 20 security to essentially stand between our protesters and kind of
are
potentially
you worried though?
violence.
Are you worried? It's kind of like what happened with J6, and this could be a completely different podcast, but are you
Right.
worried about like three-letter agencies kind of immersing themselves in a movement and creating some kind of problem, agitators that
So
could
you're saying someone who would infiltrate a peaceful
infiltrate?
movement?
Yes, absolutely, and
I think,
change the trajectory of that movement because they do that.
well, actually, that's one benefit. You're actually kind of making a good point in terms of using our service, because what we do is, because we compensate people and we create a more controlled environment where that is less likely to occur, right? And by the way, I have a
But
huge
would you get in
objection.
trouble for it if it happened? I'm just
Well, no, I mean, first of all, because every instruction we give, orally, written, any kind of instruction we give ever, is peaceful law abiding, right? Peaceful law abiding. And anyone who even suggests anything else would be immediately dismissed from our group. So if we did have someone, for whatever reason, whether it's what you suggest or more likely just a general agitator in our crowd who is saying, oh no, we should, throw a Molotov cocktail.
like a Ray Epps that was at the J6. Remember, he
Well,
was saying, "Let's go storm it, let's go," and
we would
obviously he was
immediately disassociate that person
okay.
and ask them to leave our crowd. And by the way, though, Nino, where I 100% agree with you is, I have a huge objection with this idea of entrapment by the agencies that you said. And this is really a bipartisan issue, because under the Bush administration, they did this to Muslims, right?
Yeah.
They would go and take ordinary Muslims who might kind of be upset with the war in Iraq or something, and then they would actually push them and radicalize them. Many of these people are kind of, that they would radicalize, or prone to being kind of manipulated, and then they would make it as if they busted some huge case. So I have a huge problem when they did it to Muslims under Bush administration. I have a huge problem when they did it to conservatives under the Biden administration. And I hope the Trump administration and the current director of the FBI will once and for all put an end to entrapment and not simply use it against the left. Because remember, J. Edgar Hoover, right, used it against the left, right? They used it to infiltrate the civil rights movement. So these entrapment tactics have been weaponized both by the right and the left. And as an advocate for freedom, I think that it is wholly unacceptable.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with that. So, like, what I see with the Trump you may disagree with me on this, with the Trump operation, by the way, but with Trump is that it looks more to me like an organic movement. And I don't know how it originally started, but at least now it's on fire, right? Like there's thousands and hundreds and thousands of people that go to these things. And it seems to me like right now with AOC, Bernie, and different ones, they're trying to manufacture this crowd. They're trying to get people to just spark something, and I remember when I was boxing in Oscar de la Hoya. Nobody knows this, but I was talking to one of the matchmakers, and they said, Oscar wasn't the beginning of Oscar de la Hoya was manufactured, and I was like, what do you mean?
Sure.
Because I remember women loved him, right? Well, they had groups of women that would go to these fights or his press conferences and throw their panties at him. They were
Right,
paid
they
to do
made him
that.
into a sex symbol.
Yeah, yeah, and they made him into a sex symbol, correct? And I'm not saying he wasn't he was a very good-looking guy. I'm just saying like that's how they started this. So I think the Democrats need a rock star, and I don't know if you can manufacture one, especially not one like AOC. I'm just saying like
I don't think
it seems
AOC
to
is that. I don't think AOC is it. I mean,
right, right.
AOC has got a lot of things that are probably would really upset probably 70% of the country. And of course her movement also falls flat when they're flying on private jets. I mean, it's the definition of an
Yeah,
oligarch, right? Bernie Sanders, and this is not even including his carpooling with AOC on her private jet, but Bernie has spent about 250,000 in the first quarter of this year on private jets alone, right? Not even including five-star hotels or whatever, right? So that's about $1 million a year, right? My
wow.
question to Bernie is, what percent of Americans spend over $1 million a year on private jets? Is it 1%? Probably not. Is it 0.1%? Probably
Right.
not. It's probably the 1% of the 1%, as
So
he likes to
so
say.
you're in agreement with me that the Democrats need a complete facelift. They need someone new out there.
I actually think I know who the person should be. Should
Who?
I?
Come on, say
I
it. How much so?
I think it should be Jon Stewart.
John,
The
wait, the host?
comedian. Yeah, I actually think listen to him talk. He is a direct communicator. He is smart. He is compassionate. He effectively articulates liberal values while being a complete patriot. I mean, the guy stood up for 9/11 first responders. He went to bat for them, right? He went to bat for war veterans who were hurt by these burn pits that they had in Iraq and Afghanistan, right? So he has stood up for for veterans. He's liberal, but he's not pro cancel culture. There was a moment actually in 2021, I want to say, where he went on Stephen Colbert, and Stephen Colbert is just awful, right?
Yeah,
And
he's
he was talking about the root and saying, "Hey, it is in Wuhan. It's in Wuhan." And Stephen Colbert was basically like implied that he was working for the Republicans, and Jon Stewart was like, "No, I'm speaking the truth." So he's called out his own party a lot. He is direct. He has a genuineness to him. I actually think he would be a really good candidate, frankly. And
John
I think
Stewart. Wait a minute, the guy on Grandma's Boy, the movie Grandma's Boy.
was he in that?
Yes, I think is that him?
I
Yes,
don't know. I think he's
but I mean I don't
I
care.
don't
I'm just saying
know.
like yes, I think that's I
But I
think
mean
he's a
that's
funny
my
actor. I like
idea.
him.
It's a crazy idea, but I actually think he's a very direct communicator, and he has friends on the right. I mean, he's friends with Bill O'Reilly. He's like he has. I mean, he has good dialogue with people on the other side. I don't know. I think he'd be a formidable candidate.
I'll keep an eye on him. I'll keep
But
an eye
not
on him.
AOC. I mean, I don't think he has any interest, but that's honestly part of what makes him a good candidate. I think it has to be like
Oh, you're right. That he wasn't in Grandma's Boy. You're right. That wasn't him.
it's got to be someone who's drafted, but AOC is too woke, too hypocritical. Yeah, no, it's just not gonna happen.
So let me ask you these things. Okay, so what protests are building fire right now? Which ones are starting to take off? I know the hands-off protests are gaining traction,
Sure.
but I mean, wouldn't everyone be for smaller government? I mean, come
That's why I
on.
think hands off is a great slogan because it's kind of like, hey, get your hands off my programs, what my benefits. So it's actually the smartest of the protests yet. I mean, the Democrats are often their worst enemy because
But
they
all
have,
they're doing is unveiling the fraudulent money laundering and wasteful spending, like condoms in this country and sex change surgeries in that country. I mean, it's just getting ridiculous.
well, I mean, and not all of what they cite is necessarily accurate. And I also think that a lot of what they cut are important programs. I mean, when you're talking about the programs that are trying to fight disease at their inception in the places that disease starts, third world countries in Africa, right? It's going to cost a lot more to fight them at home than a lot of those USAID programs. A lot of these are great investments. By the way, USAID is a great counter to China's influence in Africa.
So you
And
you don't like Elon Musk or Doge?
uh, I won't say that. I actually wouldn't say that because I think it's important to have responsibility in how we spend it. But I think that we're a multi-trillion-dollar government. There's gonna be silly things that are spent, but there's a lot of but I think overall the cuts are gonna be more damaging than the overall cost savings, right? So I think he's being penny wise, pound foolish with what he's doing. That's not to say that I think that but I will say that I also think the hit job against Tesla is bad. So I'm a moderate. Like I call out Elon because I think he's cutting a lot of programs that are going to really bite us in the butt later on when we don't have a counter to China in Africa, when we need to be fighting China for the rare earth minerals, when we have diseases that are emerging all across the world, right? When we have people across the world whose attitude toward America is going down and down and down. Tourism to America, which is American jobs, has gone down 20%, right? These are American jobs that are being hurt by Musk and Trump's attitude. I don't think it's possible. I don't think we can ignore those things. But what I will say is I do think there's a hit job against Musk with the Tesla protests. I think that is an orchestrated protest by
And that's not coming from you.
no, it's
Okay.
not. And I
Uh,
actually called it out, and a lot of people have been asking me, and there's more evidence coming out every day that certain short sellers of Tesla could be behind these these actions. And I just want to be very clear that I'm not naming any individual in particular or any hedge fund in particular. But what I will say is that these guys historically have lost billions and billions betting against Tesla, right? They've been shorting Tesla stock, right? That means they're betting they make money when the stock goes down. So overall, over the last 15 years, the stock has skyrocketed. I mean, it's been a roller coaster. There have been dips, but these people overall have lost a lot of money shorting the stock. Now they see an opportunity with Elon Musk's involvement with the Trump administration to say, okay, these guys are apolitical. They're just out to make a buck, right? Or billions of bucks, right? So if you have billions of dollars on the line, why wouldn't you put tens of millions of dollars into building this Tesla boycott movement and the broader protest movement?
so so the people that reach out to you, are they like non-governmental agencies, organizations that reach out to you and they say, "Hey, we need this movement. We'll pay you this much if you get this many people"?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, so
And
what if Trump, as this progresses, as this keeps going in this trajectory,
uh-huh.
starts labeling some of these NGAs or NGOs as terrorist organization? You could be in trouble for that.
Well, we wouldn't work with any organization that does those things, number one. And we would not work with any banned group or any kind of shady entity. What I will say is that we should be careful about labeling. I mean, different organizations could be, there has to be evidence for these things, right? So it is legal to fund protests in this country, right? It is legal to protest and it is legal to be paid to protest, and it is legal to fund movements.
What if it's from China? What if it's from the cartels, which is now a terrorist organization? How would you
We would
know?
not accept those. We would not
But what if
accept those funds.
how would you do the vetting for that?
Well, but I mean, by that kind of example. And it's a good example, Nino, because the way that I look at funding, it is like a system of Russian dolls. The Russian dolls, like, if you don't know what Russian dolls are, it's like little dolls that fold into bigger dolls, right?
Right.
So basically at the center, let's just say, is a billionaire. And I'm not going to say left wing or right wing, but there's a billionaire behind it. And by the way, a lot of people who contact us are individuals, wealthy individuals or wealthy or corporations that have an incentive to essentially block a policy and whatever. It's no different from lobbying or hiring a lawyer. But what I'll say is there's little dolls into bigger dolls. So what these guys are kind of an expert at doing is plausible deniability. So let's just say, I'm just going to posit that you're doing something illegal, right? So again, this is not something we would be engaged in. But if you might find this interesting. So if you're a billionaire trying to fund something illegal, you're a billionaire, you have a foundation, right? The foundation funds 501c4s. The 501c4s advocacy groups fund, give money to corporations, or as contracts. The corporations pay people, the people pay some academic group, and the academic group pays someone to fund throw a Molotov cocktail, right? That's several layers between this person, right? And there's never going to be evidence that a billionaire ordered the illegal activity. Why? Because they're smart. They're going to say, I want to fund something against X, right? And their people are going to take it from there, right? It's kind of like the old Henry VIII, would someone rid me of this meddlesome priest, right? Or like it's kind of an old saying of kind of plausible deniability,
Right.
of saying let's kind of keep that distance. So it's very hard to do, but I do caution. I know you said something about labeling kind of advocacy groups or NGOs as a domestic terrorist organization. I caution against doing something that you wouldn't want a liberal leader doing to your people, right? Like what I would want, because what if AOC does become the president and she then labels the NRA as a terrorist organization or the Gun Owners of America as a terrorist organization, right?
Well, what do you feel? What do you think about like BLM? I mean, they were looting and rioting. I mean, did you provide crowds for them?
Well, I actually have a funny story about BLM.
Okay.
Is about 9 years ago, 10 years ago, the BLM people, just about at the founding of BLM, came to me and asked me for advice on building a movement.
Wow.
Some of the people that you might recognize.
Okay.
And I actually told them to go in a totally different direction. I said, this could be the chance to create the next civil rights movement around Black economic inclusion, right? I said, why are talk about Black fatherhood, talk about crime in Black neighborhoods, talk about the lack of ownership in the Black community, that Black people are less likely to own the businesses in their neighborhood than any other group. If you stressed those things, along with, of course, responsible law enforcement, but made it a broader push of building wealth in the Black community, not at the expense of anyone else, but actually for the benefit of all society, right? You could be the next Martin Luther King. That's what I told them. And I said, if you want to build that movement, I will help you with anything you need. Because I think that's such an important thing.
But the direction it went was like off the rails.
And they went a totally different direction, and we never spoke since.
But when you look at the BLM movement, what do you see? White people.
Right. Well, that's the thing. Because
that's why I'm wondering, like, that's not organic. That has to be manufactured. They would have to call somebody and be like, hey, we need more people out of here.
Well, let me put
it showing up.
Well, Nino, let me put it to you this way. I mean, and I agree generally with what you're saying about, I mean, BLM has just really done such a bad job for the Black community, because this, like I said, they could have used this movement to build Black wealth, build Black communities, build Black neighborhoods. And the other thing I told them, I just to finish that story, is I said, you should make it so that Black voters are like Cuban American voters used to be in South Florida, the deciding votes. We're not loyal to Democrats. We're not loyal to Republicans. You better freaking earn our votes, right? If Republicans earn our votes, great. If Democrats earn our votes, great. That's how the most powerful groups in America have gained power is by saying, we're a swing vote. You help us, we're with you. You don't help us, we're with the other side. Now, let me answer the other question about BLM, which is that it actually goes to the idea of paid protesting takes multiple forms. So what we do is we compensate people who wouldn't otherwise be able to attend for supporting cause they agree with. But there are a lot of other reasons people attend protests. I mean, like a lot of the, Real Housewives who attended the BLM rallies, I mean, they might not have gotten direct cash compensation, but they were there to post it on Instagram for their followers, right? They were there to say, I'm woke. I mean, you think some Orange County housewife knows anything about institutional racism? They don't know,
Of course
right?
not. They
They
just
have
want to be a
no
part of something.
Right, right. They have no idea. They have no idea, right? So similarly, like you look at Woodstock, anti-Vietnam War protests. I mean, half those people were there to get laid and smoke pot,
And I
right?
can understand that.
I know, right. So nothing wrong with that. But even MAGA rallies, right? You talked about the huge groups there. They're kind of like a fair. It's like going to a fair. It's like it's a
Yeah, but what I
community.
noticed about MAGA rallies, and I will say this, a lot of people there are praying. They're holding hands, they're praying, they're singing the national anthem, they're very
Sure.
patriotic. And that you got to give them credit on that, man. It's
No, of
unbelievable to
course.
watch. And it moves you. It moves someone that's there for the first time. They're like, man, this is not what I thought it was going to be. It's not racist. It's not, you know what I mean? It's
No,
just everyone's holding hands and hugging, and it's a great movement.
I
Let me
think
ask you
labeling
this.
Trump supporters as racist is such a big mistake on the part of the left. I mean, when he has 50% of the Hispanic vote, like 40% of the Arab American vote, it's just, I think that's one of the dumbest talking points possible, is to try to label supporters of Trump as
So
racist.
can you walk me through the process of like creating a protest? Because like, do you call the media? Are you like, okay, we're going to be here. If you guys want to show up, we're going to be protesting against the court building. We're going to be at the
Sure.
courthouse. We're going to be protesting. Do you call the media and tell me? You'd have to give them a heads up, right? I mean,
Sure. So
okay.
a lot of times what we'll do is actually we'll create, it depends on the scope of each project because each scope is different. But a lot of times we'll incorporate like a 501(c)(4) advocacy group. We'll have like a leader of that advocacy group. So we will actually create something from the ground up. And then that group will essentially either hire a publicist or will deal with the media themselves, right? So it won't be me calling the media, it'll be one of the group leaders calling the media, right? And in some cases, we're just hired to provide the people, in which case the client or whatever the advocacy group is will handle all of that, and we just provide essentially the people and the signs and the banners and the flyers and all of that.
So
So
what
that's
is
a
like, if you
mix.
don't mind me asking your business part of this, and I'm not trying to be too nosy, but I'm
Uh,
very curious. I came from a boxing background and I dealt with promoters, club promoters. I mean, everything, advertisers, sponsors, the whole thing. I mean, is it at that level, or is it just like you get paid to deliver the crowd and it stops, or the buck stops there?
no, it doesn't
You have
stop there.
sponsors, and I mean, what?
So it really depends. So again, it depends on each particular engagement. In some engagements, we are just paid. We're providing the people, that's it. The client handles everything else. But in a lot of cases, we've had multi-year engagements on a lot of subjects where someone will come to us, a company will come to us and say, we need to build a movement to oppose this policy or support that policy. And we're leaving it to you, Adam, Crowds on Demand, the expert, to build this. And here's our kind of budget to do this, build us that movement. And we run with it. We create an advocacy group, we run ads, we do protests, we media, we run it from the ground up. So it really depends on the scope of what the client has in mind.
All right, and before we close out here, and by the way, dude, this has been a stellar podcast. I love talking to you, man. You're welcome on my show whenever you want to come on.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Can you give us, my audience, kind of like a pulse on like what protests to come? Like, what should we get ready for?
Well, I think one of the things that you're going to see more of is, I think the Tesla thing is not going to die out because, like
Wow.
I said,
But that's
there's a
not a,
lot of
that's not a that's a violence. That's
well, and
terrorism.
and that's the part that most concerns me as a Tesla owner is I don't like that. I think that's going to continue. And the reason is because there's so much money behind that. I think that's going to continue. I think you're going to have some kind of Marxist movements like the AOC, Bernie Sanders, and riding on a private jet is typical of a Marxist, right? Because Marxists like the comforts of the good life. I think you're going to see a lot more of that with, of course, paid crowd members in the audience. I mean,
So
like,
wait. Marxist, like, do you like the good life? I mean,
I like the good life.
You're making money. You're not a Marxist.
I'm not a Marxist. No, I'm
All
saying
right.
Marxists like the good life,
Okay.
but they
Okay.
shouldn't. I mean, it's like hypocritical. It's like a
Correct.
televangelist. It's like I always like to say, for every socialist, there's a private jet. For every televangelist, there's a pool boy banging his wife while he watches in the
Oh
corner.
my
So,
God.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
hypocrisy is there on both sides, to be sure. And I love calling out hypocrisy. I mean, I'm sure I've done things that are hypocritical too, so I'm not trying to put myself
Sometimes
above
I
that.
consider myself a walking contradiction. I don't know.
Sure, but I love it. There's going to be a lot of protests. But my kind of lesson to your amazing audience is that you know generally, if you want to know who's behind something, you follow the money. But that if there's anything that's violent or disruptive or not lawful, it's not us, because what we
Okay.
do. The reason, part of why I've been going on these podcasts is to set the record straight with that. What we do is legal, peaceful, and what we're trying to do is convince people and get people to think about issues, and persuade and advocate for our customers, not to do anything untoward or subversive for this country, because I love this country, and I love the First Amendment more than probably anyone else other than podcasters like you.
Well, Adam, I appreciate you, man. I really appreciate. Where do people find you? Where can they look you up?
Sure. Well, crowds on
What if we need a crowd? Where do we go?
yeah, so
On demand?
www.crowdsondemand.com, crowdsondemand.com. You can also follow me on Twitter, X, at CEO Adam Swart. That's Adam SWART. So feel free to follow me for my thoughts on social media, or visit our website and engage further.
All right, Adam, stay with me just for 1 second. Thank you for
Sure.
joining me.